Saraswati, Ma Kali, Ma Lakshmi, Ma Durga, Sri Ma Sharda Devi. All these are the mother figures seeing whom I have grown up. Bengali is a feeling I know is so dear to the whole of India for the obvious reason of all great past contribution it has had to India and to humanity as a whole. The capital city Kolkata, previously also known as Kolikata, is said to be named after Ma Kali. I have always been fascinated by the stories and grace of all these divine mothers since childhood. Growing up in a Bengali household, I never very much felt a lack of self-worth in terms of opportunities ever. I never felt acute gender divide while growing up, and all the struggles of women that I could hear about in history, starting from sati to oppression of women having access to education and exploitation of women, all those societal pressure and discrimination, I had thought in my mind that the human civilization has now evolved from. All these barbaric days are now past, are now gone by stories. We now live in a free world where everyone believes in equality, everyone knows how to respect one another, and everyone knows how to take care of one another. That was my idea about the world while growing up. That shaped up probably because of growing with the fruits of all the reforms Bengal had seen during Bengal Renaissance. But I was wrong. It was a wrong assumption of a growing little girl about the world she expected to have an exponential growth. When I entered my adulthood, I came to terms with the reality of the world. Starting from experiencing toxicity in professional life and in personal life, to coping and understanding the ways to heal and grow immune through spirituality, life has so far by God's grace taught me that the human civilization right now is at an emotional crisis more than ever. Yes, it might sound weird, awkward, but that is the word, emotional crisis. There is so much violence, verbal, physical, and also psychological, all around us. Can we deny that? What does that signify? Is it not an expression of or a grave symptom of all the disorders going on within us as a whole? If I talk about India in particular, it has always bothered me why and how a great civilization like Bharat could get into slavery for 1,000 years and is still facing the trauma bond of the abuse, and how the trauma is being passed on to generations after generations.
Year 1000 CE, India was the most prosperous country and accounted for nearly 1/3 of the GDP of the whole world. For the previous 2500 years, India had seen an unbroken journey of economic growth, assimilation of new races, and the development of a vast cultural heritage. For nearly 1000 years during the Vedic period, 1500 to 600 BC, India developed the vast and marvelously rich body of Vedic literature, a literary and religious legacy unparalleled in any other civilization. Between 600 to 200 BC, India saw a period of exceptional creative ferment, leading to the birth of two of the world's great religions and the creation of the early empires. In the next 800 years, right up to 650 CE, India experienced the first golden age of its classical period. The crucial catalyst was the unprecedented economic prosperity that India enjoyed. The early medieval period saw great maturation on all fronts. However, in the late medieval period, the creative phase of Indian civilization was coming to an end, and it began to experience deep internal fissures that were weakening it. India was becoming fragmented from great stable empires into numerous short-lived warring kingdoms, which led to a loss of political cohesion. There was a decline in global trade. This led to economic stagnation. With the increasing divisions of caste and rigidity of social structures, India began to experience a loss of social cohesion. And to top it all, religious life of Indians was also vitiated with the proliferation of priestcraft, superstition, and degenerate cults. In short, India was weakened internally. An internally weakened India now faced tremendous external challenges. India experienced wave after wave of Islamic attacks. This included the 17 consecutive attacks by Mahmud of Ghazni, the attacks of Muhammad Ghori in 1175, and the Mongol invasion of India around 1221. Each subsequent invasion led to a large-scale plunder. In the words of the Persian historian Abdullah Wasaf, the Mohammedan army brought the country to utter ruin and destroyed the lives of the inhabitants, plundered the cities, and captured their offspring. Many temples were deserted and the idols were broken and trodden underfoot, the largest of which was one called Somnath. This was followed by an unbroken subjugation of the Indian population by the new rulers, starting from the Sultanate of Delhi to the era of Mughal rule. In this period, the overall inequities in Indian society increased tremendously, and we as a people became further weakened. Then followed the British. The British conquest led to a huge draining of wealth from India, but it also led to the destruction of our education system and its replacement with a new system designed to make clerks of Indians. Lord Macaulay's minutes of 1835 clearly states, "We must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern. A class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in tastes, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect." This control of the education system led to a colonization of the mind, the most devastating form of control and subjugation that India had ever been subjected to in its history. Indians began to believe what the British said themselves, that a single shelf of a good European library is worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. How did India respond? In the 19th century, India saw the birth of several reform movements in different parts of the country. These were aimed at removing visible social evils such as sati, caste rigidity, polygamy, and child marriages. But they stopped short of addressing the deeper psychological, cultural, and civilizational challenges that India was facing. India was in fact facing a much deeper existential threat. Its very self-esteem, its very individuality, its very faith in its history, its culture, its civilization was shaken. In the words of Swami Sharadananda, a brother disciple of Swami Vivekananda, Indians came to believe that the long-cherished traditions and beliefs that they had held were wrong, and the traditions were primitive and semi-civilized, because Western science had proved them to be so. At this point in time, what India needed was not social reform alone, but the fundamental reawakening of a civilization. And indeed, a deeper response was emerging. First and foremost, he pointed out that the neglect of the masses is our greatest sin.
I consider that the great national sin is the neglect of the masses, and that is one of the causes of our downfall. No amount of politics would be of any avail until the masses in India are once more well-educated, well-fed, and well-cared for.
The second cause for our downfall was the mental isolation of the Indians.
One of the great causes for India's misery and downfall has been that she narrowed herself, went into her shell as the oyster does, and refused to give her jewels and her treasures to the other races of mankind.
The third big cause of our misery was the fact that education was denied to large masses of Indians.
The chief cause of India's ruin has been the monopolizing of the whole education and intelligence of the land by dint of pride and royal authority amongst a handful of men.
And finally, he warned Indians that without treating women with respect, they could not expect to progress.
All nations have attained greatness by paying proper respect to women. That country and that nation which do not respect women have never become great, nor will ever be in the future.
Neglect of the masses is equivalent to the invalidation of the existence to exert power. Watch this video.
The narcissist devalues you because you refuse to freeze. You refuse to become an ancient Egyptian mummy. You refuse to play dead. and you refuse to conform to the snapshot of you that he has in his mind. I encourage you to watch previous videos about the process of snapshotting. The narcissist takes a snapshot of you, then he photoshops the snapshot, and this is idealization. He introjects it, he transforms it into an internal object. And then you're supposed to become one with a snapshot. You're supposed to merge or fuse with a snapshot. You're never supposed to deviate or diverge from the snapshot. And if you do, this provokes in the narcissist a lot of aggression. The narcissist punishes you for deviating from the snapshot, because the narcissist is capable of interacting only with internal objects. He is not capable of interacting with you. He's not capable of accepting your autonomous, independent existence and acting that way. So when you threaten the internal object, you're threatening the narcissist's mind. Additionally, disagreeing with the snapshot, diverging from the snapshot, challenging, undermining the snapshot, becoming suddenly an autonomous, agentic person with your own agenda, your own life, your own growth pattern and personal development, etc., etc. This challenges the narcissist's grandiosity, because the narcissist needs to be 100,000% in control. He is godlike. He needs to micromanage every aspect of your life, every word you say, every breath you take. And so anytime you demonstrate to the narcissist that he is not fully in control of you, it challenges his grandiosity, and there's nothing more dear to the narcissist than his grandiosity. Nothing. The narcissist would do anything, would sacrifice anyone, would destroy everything just to maintain his grandiosity, which in his mind is identified with freedom.
Mental isolation is the psychological isolation exerted by the people who want to be in power.
Isolation is a key element of all toxic relationships. It makes gaslighting more potent if there are no dissenting voices to the narcissistic gaslighters. Now, the malignant narcissistic folks, they go in fast. They just isolate you, right? They put trackers on you. They cut you off from the world. That's the kind of isolation we see in dynamics such as coercive control. However, in other forms of narcissistic relationships, it's a more insidious form of isolation. Often in those relationships, they don't just tell us to not call our friends or family. They just aren't supportive of those relationships. They make digs, comments, may even make us suspicious of these folks. Remember, you're already doubting yourself because of the narcissistic relationship. But you also may not get it, and you may want the relationship to work. So they may play on a plausible seed. For example, you may have been competitive with a sister, but it was healthy competition. And the narcissistic person may take that seed of competition and play upon that dynamic. So they don't directly say, don't call your sister, don't spend time with your friends. But there's a sort of disapproval hanging in the air. As though if you did spend time with these folks, you know you'd be criticized or questioned. Things like, why are you choosing to spend time with someone who's weird? What's wrong with you? Or what is up with you? Like, is it so important? Your sister's always so competitive with you. Like, what's that about? And you may have even initially pushed back on that narcissistic person's critiques of your friend. But if the narcissistic person is a louder and more consistent voice, and you couple that with the destabilization of the gaslighting and the manipulation, the narcissistic voice is going to win. With each day in a narcissistic relationship, self-doubt grows, and they climb into that and are better able to control and manipulate.
Education was denied to large masses to arise a sense of inadequacy.
Financial independence and narcissistic abuse. A narcissist doesn't want you to become financially independent because it threatens the shit out of them. They know if you have enough money to have a separate financial identity and not beg them for every penny, they won't be able to feel superior. By making you financially dependent on them, they control your actions and limit your ability to make independent decisions. This can be especially true in situations where the narcissist is the primary breadwinner or has significant financial resources at their disposal. If you become financially independent, you will be less reliant on the narcissist for money and beyond their control. Furthermore, if you become financially independent, you may eventually be able to leave the relationship altogether, which is a prospect that terrifies a narcissist.
treatment of its women. Women in general are the embodiment of empathy, love, and care. But being overly empathetic becomes the key for women to be narcissistically abused. When the rulers of the land are narcissists, they target the vulnerable ones first. Why is that so? Because that is the easiest thing to do. Who are the most vulnerable? Women? Is that why women are targeted almost every time when there is an attack on freedom, or even in general in case of social crimes anywhere in the world? I will slightly differ in the diction and the sense here. Women are not vulnerable. Women are just overly empathetic. In general, of course, there are also women who are themselves narcissists, but in general, who are not narcissistic women, I am talking about them. And hence, they become the target because they do not call out and they ignore the red flags. They value others more than themselves, while ideally the right balance would be that they value themselves as much as they value others. Hence, what we derive from this analysis is, as a part of 1,000 years of slavery, we were actually subjected to narcissistic abuse. Please note that, because a thorough understanding of this abuse is essential for us so that we can release the pain trapped inside of us, knowingly or unknowingly, as a result of this abuse, and so that we can start working on our healing journey. This is very much essential because otherwise we are showing symptoms of being narcissists ourselves as well.
Vivekananda asked the question,
Why is it that we 330 millions of people have been ruled for the last 1,000 years by any and every handful of foreigners who chose to walk over our prostrate bodies?
his answer,
What is the cause? Do you not know? You know too well. The only cause is that you are weak, weak, weak. Your body is weak. Your mind is weak. You have no faith in yourselves. The remedy for weakness is not brooding over weakness, but thinking of strength. Teach men of the strength that is already within them. If faith in ourselves had been more extensively taught and practiced, I am sure a very large portion of the evils and miseries that we have would have vanished.
But I feel my initial question still remains unanswered. How did such a strong and old civilization of Bharat become so weak internally at the first place? To find the answer, let us look at the Panchkosh model and the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, side by side. In this Panchkosh model, we know through the mind sciences, as mentioned in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, we are composition of these 5 layers of bodies: the physical body, the energy body, the mental body, and the intellect body, and also the bliss body. All these bodies are interconnected and are interdependent. Any damage or any deficiency in any layer impacts all the other 5 layers, all the other 4 layers significantly. Now let us look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It comprises of again 5 layers of needs existing in parallel, but the needs can be fulfilled only hierarchically. The layers are physiological needs, safety and security needs, love and belonging needs, self-esteem needs, and self-actualization needs. The first 2 layers being the survival needs, and the top 3 being the needs for expansion. Say one's physiological needs are not met, say because of a warlike situation in one's country or in any other random situation by birth. Then which layer is going to get impacted in the Panchkosh model? Primarily, it will affect the physical body, which will eventually affect all the other bodies. Hence, such a person will live in a survival mode, always looking for the threats and building survival strategies subconsciously. A person whose physiological needs are not met, all the other layers in Maslow's hierarchy will obviously be not met. Now, suppose someone has one's physiological needs met, but doesn't have one's safety and security needs met. What will happen with that person? If we have a closer look at the safety and security layer, we will observe it not only comprises of physical safety, that is health, but also financial safety, that is employment and property, and another safety which is called emotional safety, that is family and social ability. Now, a person might have a good physical health, might have financial safety as well, might also have a family, but doesn't have healthy relationships. In that case also, the person will remain in a survival mode, always looking for the emotional threats and building survival strategies, again subconsciously. A person whose safety needs are not met, all the other layers in Maslow's hierarchy will obviously be not met. But let us take the example of Duryodhan. Duryodhan was born to a king, which implies he was financially secured. He had no physical disabilities like that of his father, which implies he was physically secured as well. His father Dhritarashtra pampered him a lot. His mother Gandhari also loved him enough. He had a maternal uncle called Shakuni who was always nurturing him. So does this imply he was emotionally secured? Does this imply he had healthy relationships? Unfortunately, not. How? Dhritarashtra was physically insecure. Physically handicapped, making him emotionally insecure. And an emotionally insecure person cannot give emotional security to anyone, especially one's own child. Now, whoever is physically handicapped, that doesn't mean they will be emotionally insecure. The ones who work on their emotional aspects, they are much more matured emotionally. But specifically in case of Dhritarashtra, this is what had happened. He was physically dependent as well as emotionally insecure as a result of that dependency. Hence, Duryodhan got emotional insecurities emotionally inherited from his father. Meaning this got engraved in the emotional DNA of Duryodhan. I'm using the convention of emotional DNA just to explain, just to emphasize the signature of that emotional pattern in the emotional ways of doing things in Duryodhan. Shakuni, on the other hand, was externally always nurturing Duryodhan, was passing on all his failed wishes and vindictive feelings and jealousy continuously to Duryodhan. We have seen that, right? Hence, he was damaging Duryodhan's emotional health further, infecting Duryodhan with his own emotional wounds. So, in this example, we see that a person who was supposed to have all the Maslow's hierarchy of needs well met was still stuck in the survival layer itself. And that too not because of any direct wounds or traumas, but through indirect, inherited, that is internal biological sense, and through externally infected emotional traumas. You can map it biologically also, right? How the infections work and how when your immune system internally weakens, how the infections work more in a better way in you. As per Chanakya, also the personality of a child is shaped 50% by the personality of the parents, 25% of his or her own nature, and 25% by the influence of the environment. In the case of Duryodhan, both his environment as majorly influenced by Shakuni and his parent as majorly impacted by Dhritarashtra were both toxic enough for him to become who he was. So now it seems we arrived at the answer to how such a strong and old civilization of Bharat became so weak internally. Of course, I am not giving all the blame to Duryodhan or Dhritarashtra or Shakuni. I am just taking them as an example of how the pattern of emotional abuse and emotional transfer of abuse happens, regardless of if this person is a king or not a king, is poor or rich. It's because of the unaddressed, unhealed emotional traumas of individuals being passed on from one generation to the other inherently. Hence, work on self becomes pivotal in protecting and regulating the soul of the nation at every individual level. Let's now try to understand how an emotionally traumatized individual like that of Duryodhan and the likes cope with their traumas. This will help us understand how our default responses are wired inside us as a result of years of narcissistic abuse that is being psychologically inherited from generations to generations. What are the various possible coping mechanisms? But wait. First, what is meant by coping mechanism? A coping mechanism is a conscious or unconscious strategy used to manage or reduce unpleasant emotions or to deal with difficulties or struggles in life. Coping mechanisms can be behaviors or cognitions and can be individual or social. They can help people maintain their mental and emotional well-being. In my observation, experience and study, by God's grace, I have found that widely there are 4 major coping mechanisms that human psychology takes consciously or unconsciously in such emotional traumatic situations. First, where one hates oneself and also hates the world. Such individuals might be suicidal or might have criminal mindset, might demonstrate traits of psychopath and extreme cold behavior. They can be sadist as well. Second, where one hates the world but loves oneself. Such individuals grow narcissistic personality disorder, which is a very manipulative and controlling personality disorder with zero empathy for others. Third, where one hates oneself but loves the world. Such individuals lack in self-worth, are prone to abuse and invasion, might also get into any kind of addiction, drug, alcohol, or sex. Fourth, where one loves oneself and also loves the world. Such individuals are the likes of Prahlad. If you know the story of Prahlad, where his nature and perseverance could defy the influence of his father on his personality in the guided influence of Narad Muni. Of course, out of all the 4, the 4th is the best one for obvious reason that this approach protects both oneself and the world. But at the same time, the 4th one is a coping mechanism selected by individuals after much conscious efforts. It doesn't come subconsciously, and hence very few succeed in doing that inner self-healing work and belong to that category of the people who are healed and help heal others. But how do we know that the 4th one is both good for oneself and for others? Look at this circuit diagram. I have named it as war circuit breaker. If you look at it, all the first 3 categories are either raging war against the world or against themselves with their behaviors and actions to cope, to survive, and to attain emotional regulation. They keep the locus of control outside of themselves. They always blame the situation. In this process, the 4th category gets re-traumatized by the victims of the trauma. Remember, the 4th category was traumatized already, and they get re-traumatized by the already victims of the trauma. Meanwhile, the other 3 categories continue attacking the whole world and the loop continues. But the 4th category would respond with non-violence, which is equal to fostering a healing environment for all the 3 categories of victims, 2 of which are now perpetrators. In response to this act of benevolence, Of the fourth category of Prahlads, the raging victims have two choices. Either heal in that supportive environment and transform to the Prahlad category themselves, which is very unlikely in case of psychopaths and narcissists because of their lot of complexities in the psychology, or continue attacking, which is equal to do violence, or like verbal, physical and emotional, with even the benevolent ones. So if they choose the violence again and again, what would the fourth category do in return? Remember, this fourth category of individuals are emotionally regulated individuals. They do not need to attack the violent category for any emotional regulation or survival purpose. They are in fact that category of individuals who are eligible to fulfill their self-realization and self-actualization needs because they are the emotionally secure individuals who have worked consciously on themselves and have overcome the survival mode. Such individuals would consciously attempt to attain self-actualization and self-realization. But if required, they will prepare for the first and the last war. That too only after having self-actualization, self-realization needs met. They will go with the first and the last war with the violent category only if required. And what is the condition that makes them decide that yes, that is what is required? The condition being, if this category of violence, the violence making category fails to heal after multiple fostering attempts. This war attempt is now to break this unending loop of violence and to bring peace once and for all. I call this war non-violent because the purpose of this war is not to find emotional regulation in the outside world, but the purpose is again to help the fellow victims of trauma get released from their default and subconscious loop of violence on their multiple failures in trying to heal and establish peace. If you see, this is what exactly had happened in the Kurukshetra, that is in Mahabharata. This is why the war of Pandavas was impersonal, but the same war was personal to Kauravas. There too, after multiple attempts of negotiation from the side of Pandavas, it didn't bring any peace between the two sides. We have seen how from even the childhood days, Duryodhana had attempted murder of his own cousins, Bhim. Right? So those things have happened multiple times with the Pandavas, and Pandavas have tolerated and endured all of it, tried to foster a healthy environment every time. But finally it didn't work and the peace had to be brought. This is why that final war was a war circuit breaker. If you look at this growth quadrant chart, hence derived shows, real growth happens only when you have a positive view of the world and positive view of yourself. But wait, where are all these discussions going? What about the woman we thought we were talking about? The name of the video was what should be the women of India be doing? Okay, then let's talk about women specifically now. I wanted to research on history of women in India to find the link between the women and this emotional instability in India. What I found was mind-boggling. The list is so huge and the stories are all so great that I can neither talk about all of them in one single video, nor can talk about all the details related to them in one single video. So I'll just touch upon a few. Maitreyi, who lived during the later Vedic period in ancient India, is mentioned in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad as one of the two wives of the Vedic sage Yajnavalkya. She is estimated to have lived around the 8th century BCE. Maitreyi is described as an Advaita philosopher who never married. This is according to the Mahabharata and Grihastha Sutras. In ancient Sanskrit literature, she is known as a Brahmavadini, an expounder of the Veda. Maitreyi appears in ancient Indian texts, such as in a dialogue where she explores the Hindu concept of Atman, soul or self in a dialogue with Yajnavalkya in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. According to this dialogue, love is driven by a person's soul, and Maitreyi discusses the nature of Atman and Brahman and their unity, the core of Advait philosophy. This Maitreya Ajnavalkya dialogue is the topic of Shureshwara's Vartika, a commentary. Maitreyi is cited as an example of the education opportunities available to women in Vedic India and their philosophical achievements. She is considered a symbol of Indian intellectual women, and an institution is named in her honor in Delhi. Gargi Vachaknavi was an ancient Indian sage and philosopher. In Vedic literature, she is honored as a great natural philosopher, renowned expounder of the Vedas, and known as Brahmavadini, a person with knowledge of Brahma Vidya. In the 6th and the 8th Brahmana of Vrihadaranyaka Upanishad, her name is prominent as she participates in the Brahma Yagna, a philosophic debate organized by King Janaka of Videha, and she challenges the sage Yajnavalkya with perplexing questions on the issue of Atman. She is also said to have written many hymns in the Rig Veda. She remained a celibate all her life and was held in veneration by the conventional Hindus. Gargi was the daughter of sage Vachaknu in the lineage of sage Garga. 800 to 500 BC was named after her father Gargi Vachaknavi. From a young age, she evinced a keen interest in Vedic scriptures and became very proficient in the fields of philosophy. She became highly knowledgeable in the Vedas and Upanishads in the Vedic times and held intellectual debates with other philosophers. So we see Yajnavalkya over here also with having debates with Gargi Vachaknavi as well. Damayanti is a figure in the love story found in the Vanaparv book of the Mahabharata. She is the daughter of Bhima, not the Pandava, and a princess of the Vidarbha kingdom, who marries King Nala of the Nishadha kingdom. The figure is also found in other Hindu texts by many other authors in numerous Indian languages. She also, along with Nala, are the central figures in the 12th century text Nishad Chanta, one of the 5 Mahakavyas, great epic poems in the canon of Sanskrit literature. We will go in details later on in other videos. Ahalyabai Holkar was the Rajmata and later the ruling queen of Indore within the Maratha Confederacy. She established Maheshwar in Madhya Pradesh as the seat of the Holkar dynasty. A beloved figure of Indian history, she is renowned for good governance, social welfare, and humanitarian work, along with religious, educational, and cultural advancements. She contributed to the growth of Indian architecture through the commission of various temples, ghats, and dharmashalas. Ahalyabai's Matha or charitable endowments spread across India. Remembered as a sadhvi or holy woman, Ahalyabai did not grieve for the hardship she faced in life, including the losses of her husband and 2 of her children. She had a reputation of patience, faith, and advocacy for the elevation of Indian culture. Well, this is one of my most favorites, Savitri and Satyavan. Most of us know, even at this generation, that Savitri and Satyavan are a legendary couple in Hinduism. Savitri is a princess who marries an exiled prince named Satyavan, who is prophesied to die early. She saves her husband from the god of death, Yama, persuading the deity to restore his life. The oldest known version of the story of Savitri and Satyavan is found in Vanaparva, the book of the forest of the Mahabharata. The story occurs as an embedded narrative in the Mahabharata as told by sage Markandeya. When Yudhishthir asks Markandeya whether there has ever been a woman whose devotion matched Draupadi's, Markandeya replies by relating this story. We will dive deep into this fascinating story in some other video. It is time for us to take notice of Ubhay Bharti, who taught Shankaracharya that wisdom cannot exist without including the household, the body, and the woman. This also gives a strong message that ages ago women were given that position to judge the scholars. Ubhay Bharti was the daughter of Vishnu Mitra, who resided on the banks of the Sona River. Bharti is the only woman arbiter in a debate as mentioned in Hinduism. This also indicates the position of women in Hindu civilization. Saint Meera, also known as Meerabai, is a famous one, right? All of us know. She was a 16th century poet and a devotee of Krishna. She is celebrated as a bhakti saint, particularly in the North Indian Hindu tradition. Meerabai was born into a Rajput royal family of Kudki district of Pali, Rajasthan, India. Andal is an 8th century Tamil saint and one of the 12 Alvars, that is the saints, and the only woman Alvar of Vaishnavism. She wrote the great Tamil works of Tirupavai, that is 30 verses, and Nachiyar Tirumuzi, 143 verses. Andal is known for her unwavering devotion to Lord Vishnu. Please pardon me for any pronunciation mistakes. Rani Rashmani from 1793 to 1861 was an Indian businesswoman, entrepreneur, zamindar, philanthropist and the founder of the Dakshineshwar Kali temple in Kolkata. She remained closely associated with Sri Ramakrishna Paramhans after she appointed him as the priest of the Dakshineshwar temple. She was also one of the earliest social reformers in early 19th century Bengal and was one of the forerunners of the Bengal Renaissance. Besides, she also led many of the Renaissance resistances against the encroaching British administration and their presence in all walks of colonial society in the Bengal province. Her other construction works include the construction of a road from Subarnarekha River to Puri for the pilgrims, Babu Ghat, Ahiri Tola Ghat and Neemtola Ghat for the everyday pathas at the Ganga. She also offered considerable charity to the Imperial Library, now known as National Library of India, and the Hindu College, now known as the Presidency University. I want to glance upon a few of the commentary by Swami Vivekananda on Women of India and womanhood. His advice: to all women, every man, save her husband, should be as her son. To all men, every woman, save his own wife, should be as his mother. That is how he defined chastity. What he had said to make a beginning in women's education. Our Hindu women easily understand what chastity means because it is their heritage. Now, first of all, intensify that ideal within them above everything else so that they may develop a strong character by the force of which in every stage of their life, whether married or single, if they prefer to remain so, they will not be in the least afraid even to give up their lives rather than flinch an inch from their chastity. Is it little heroism to be able to sacrifice one's life for the sake of one's ideal, whatever that ideal may be? What he said about women of India. With 500 men, the conquest of India might take 50 years. With as many women, not more than a few weeks. I love this one. Sorry, men. What he said about the reason behind our weakness as a nation. Without Shakti or power, there is no regeneration for the world. Why is it that our country is the weakest and most backward of all countries? Like he was speaking at that time period of before India was independent. But anyway, this applies till this date. Even if we are not the weakest or the most backward, but we still have a lot to progress, right? So the reason is because Shakti is held in dishonor here. Educate your women first and leave them to themselves. Then they will tell you what reforms are necessary for them. In matters concerning them, who are you? Women will work out their own destinies much better too than men can ever do for them. All the mischief to women has come because men undertook to shape the destiny of women. This is what he talked about the problems faced by women of India. In his speech on Women of India delivered in America, Swamiji prophesied that the new civilization of the future will be created by modern women with Hindu spiritual culture. Civilization has been three types: the Roman, the Greek, the Hindu. The Roman type is the type of organization, conquest, steadiness, but lacking in emotional nature, appreciation of beauty, and higher emotions. Its defect is cruelty. The Greek is essentially enthusiastic for the beautiful but frivolous and has tendency to become immoral. The Hindu type is essentially metaphysical and religious, but lacking in all the elements of organization and work. Makes the Romance organization, the power of Greek's wonderful love for the beautiful, and the Hindu's backbone of religion and love of God up together and bring in the new civilization. Swamiji on motherhood. Every manifestation of power in the universe is mother. In my opinion, a race must first cultivate a great respect for motherhood through the sanctification and inviolability of marriage before it can attain to the ideal of perfect chastity. The mother is the ideal of love. She rules the family. She possesses the family. The one thing that fulfills womanhood, that is womanliness in woman, is motherhood. Hence, what should women of India do in the current context and time especially? Number 1. Build healthy relationships and emotional regulation. This is to understand their own emotions and regulate them. Heal all your past traumas and grow immune to emotional attacks. Number 2. Help establish emotional security. Women who are financially and physically independent and regulated can work on their own emotional regulation to help other financially or physically dependent women to become independent in all the three sides: financially, physically, and emotionally. Number 3. Education plus financial independence plus chastity. We need the educated, financially independent, chaste woman to take charge of their own emotions to help uplift other women and rightly nurture their own families. Please note, I did not talk about the basic women health and other survival issues pertaining to current India, that is dowry, feticide, sexual exploitation, rape culture specifically, because I wanted to hit at the root cause of it all.
যদি কেউ কথা না কয়, ওরে ওরে ও অভাগা, কেউ কথা না কয়। যদি সবাই থাকে মুখ ফিরায়ে, সবাই করে ভয়। যদি সবাই থাকে মুখ ফিরায়ে, সবাই করে ভয়। তবে পরাণ খুলে ও তুই মুখ ফুটে তোর মনের কথা একলা বলো রে। ও তুই মুখ ফুটে তোর মনের কথা একলা বলো রে। যদি তোর ডাক শুনে